Monster Hunter World Iceborne is the first major DLC for any Monster Hunter game ever. Most DLC is just like a little add-on to a game, but Iceborne is almost like an entirely new game that just uses the original as a template. So even if you're unfamiliar with Monster Hunter World, then you can watch my original video that I did in early 2018. But in short, it's a pretty gosh darned good game. I'll be assuming everyone watching this knows about the base game, so I'm not going to be covering the game's premise as much as what's new and what I liked or disliked about it. I also won't be spoiling any of the endgame monsters that weren't publicly advertised, for the sake of those still waiting to buy the game on PC, so don't worry. I gotcha. While Monster Hunter World started off in low rank and later introduced you to high rank, which had the player taking on elder dragons and tempered monsters alike, Iceborne introduces a new rank called Master Rank, which, while it brings back every single monster from the base game and gives them new surprising moves to deal with, as well as a bigger health pool and more damaging attacks, it also introduces a handful of new monsters native to the new ice biome, Hoarfrost Reach. Yeah, they actually called it that. It's actually the most expansive area in the game so far, with 5 camps to choose from and a new Grimalkyne tribe known as the Boa Boa. But what's interesting and engaging about Iceborne isn't simply the single new map that's been added, but the various gameplay tweaks that have been implemented to make the combat feel more fresh than it ever has. The Clutch Claw, which has been advertised to hell and back, is a really neat new concept. Instead of just standing around and dodging enemy attacks, retaliating with your weapon, and occasionally going in for the satisfying mount attack that knocks the enemy down and allows you and your team an extended window during which they can wail on the target. Now you can latch onto an enemy's body part, deal some damage, and soften it up for a few minutes, and allowing the rest of your team more ample opportunities to score some critical hits across a broader surface area. You can also use the Slinger with heavy weapons to unleash a shotgun blast to stun the monster momentarily, or most useful of all, rappel onto the monster's face, stab him to make it turn 90 degrees, and then unload all of your Slinger ammo in its face to send it flying into a wall, and knocking it down so you and your friends can absolutely hammer it with damage. It's completely changed the momentum of battle, making it so that you have a greater deal of options with which to feel like a tactical badass dragon slayer that can read the enemy better than it can read you, before murdering it in cold blood on its own turf and then wearing its skin and finishing off its family. Rated E for everyone. It's also noteworthy that lighter weapon classes will need to make several attempts to soften a monster's hide when performing the Clutch Claw attack, but will instead usually drop Slinger ammo for the party to use, whereas bigger classes like Lance won't usually drop any Slinger ammo, but will always soften the monster in one attempt. So it's a clever little trade-off, as the heavy hitters will always make the enemy weaker, and the lighter classes will always be a great utility for their party when they need those precious red rocks. Iceborne really does a good job of redesigning armor and weapons to look and feel more cool than they did in the base game. A lot of the armor from vanilla looked pretty solid, but towards the late game they started to feel kind of silly. The Teostra and Lunastra armor in particular come to mind as some of the best examples. Here we have 2 badass manticores with beautiful flowing coats of red or blue fur. So what should we make their armor look like? Oh, I don't know, how about a doofy chest piece robot with big prominent cog nipples on the chest? Yeah, that sounds like a look most players will go for. Similarly, the Paolumu and Kirin armor look very gay-bar-y. They changed this with the Master Rank versions, making Paolumu's armor look more akin to a winter-ready adventurer, and making Kirin's armor look like either a brony in his Saturday morning robes, or a Final Fantasy character with an extremely deep V-neck. Hey, I never said they were perfect, just better. They also made Teostra armor actually stylish, with an aesthetic akin to a regal lion knight with a gold-trimmed cape and beautiful silver hair. And even the beta version looks great too. Sorry, gear nipples, you're a thing of the past now. A lot of the weapons have gotten an overhaul in how they function. For example, the Charge Blade now takes more talent to utilize, as the Element Discharge move now covers a more narrow width than it did in vanilla. The Insect Glaive can now Clutch Claw from mid-air, adding to a more acrobatic playstyle than it had previously. The Hunting Horn gets a cool new spin attack, which adds a slightly greater emphasis on DPS, instead of Sword and Shield just having the usual single combo in which you jump back, charge up an attack, and land on an enemy before chaining into either a mid-air mount or a downward shield bash stun. Now you have the option to perform a flurry of sword attacks before stabbing into the enemy and then kicking off. And my main weapon, Lance, now has the coolest Clutch Claw move that lets you guard counter into a grapple that prevents you from being knocked off in literally any circumstance. I honestly find myself doing it way too often only to feel cucked when the monster ends up going for my teammates instead of me, and I'm left just standing there with my metaphorical dick out. My teammates just end up seeing me flying across the screen, but from my angle it feels like In the first game, you were given 3 house upgrades. One in your grandpa's basement, the next in a slightly larger room with a cool aquarium, and the third in a big regal estate with an open patio that probably attracts a lot of mosquitoes. But for Iceborne, they went all out by not only giving the player a giant luxury suite with a gorgeous view and a nearby hot spring that you can share with the local squirrels, but on top of everything else, you can now customize the furniture inside of your home to a pretty impressive degree, allowing for customization of materials, placing specific decorations on tables and shelves, changing the color and texture of the wallpaper and floor, and adding more pets than ever before. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it was kind of cool. There isn't much of a point to it at the moment, but Ryozo Sugimoto said they plan on adding a patch in the future to allow friends to visit your home. So that'll be cool for people who want to just kick back and hang out and voice chat whenever it happens. I love that Seliana allows for much more lateral movement compared to the very vertically oriented Astera. Now you simply walk over to the specified NPC and get what you need. There's a new area called the Steamworks, which lets you play a button-guessing minigame that has a chance to give you armor spheres and consumable items. And while it's nice to do it between missions, it's a very slow chore. The most annoying aspect to me is the fact that you could previously grind out weekly limited bounties to have a chance to score a gold Wyverian print, used to trade for a rare gemstone that has a very low drop or carve rate. But now the only way to get the celestial Wyverian print, which are used to acquire mantles, aka the new Iceborne version of gems, is to play the Steamworks game, and hope you'll get a bunch of lucky red combos in a row, which is completely random and devoid of any strategy. The entire point of gold Wyverian prints was to bypass RNG exactly once per week to help cut down on the grind, but instead we're given a time-consuming RNG game that won't guarantee your chances of getting a rare print. You can hold down the right shoulder button to auto-press the buttons for you, but it still takes like 10 minutes on average to complete it. So I'm wondering why they thought this was less tedious than just grinding bounties. The Gathering Hub in the base game left a lot to be desired. You could take on quests, visit your room, eat food, arm wrestle with people, and that was about it. Whenever you wanted to go do literally anything else, you had to go back to the single-player hub and ruin the momentum of hanging out with friends. The Gathering Hub in Seliana is decidedly more social, as you can not only visit the smithy together via a convenient staircase linking the two together, but you can sit in a sauna together with friends before you stumble out in an overheated stupor. You can take a foot bath with your feline and interact with him in a number of incredibly cute ways. You can sit in the hot springs while your annoying friends splash you repeatedly to ruin your romantic date. You can line up to take pictures with friends using the new camera system, and probably a bunch of other stuff I haven't found yet. It would still be nice to give you all of the same vendors in the Gathering Hub like the older games used to, but for the most part it's an improvement. In the worst case scenario, modders will just fix it like they did the Astera Gathering Hub in the PC version, where they added every single vendor there. So for now, we wait. Tailraiders were a thing that I initially dismissed upon hearing about them pre-launch, as I assumed it was identical to a wing drake system in which you let a monster take you down a specific path. But man oh man was I wrong. Once you call a Tailraider to your side, you can mount it before it'll take off after the monster you're currently hunting. Once it's on the move, you're free to drink attack and defense buffs, as well as sharpen your weapon. It got to the point where my friends and I would hop on our little dino buddies even though they only ran to the next area just so we could sharpen our weapons and then attack our target with a vaulting attack in an attempt to mount the monster. So I'm really not exaggerating when I say it's a definitive game changer that significantly improves our experience traveling from place to place. Although as a Lance main, I still enjoy the occasional mad dash across the map, so I'm definitely torn on my options. One thing I want to advise people to do in preparation of Iceborne is to finish all of your Grimalkyne quests and then get all the Palico tools, since using the Tailrider to navigate around the map is contingent on you having unlocked all of them, and being able to use it in the new area requires you to have unlocked every other gadget first. So PC players should go ahead and do that if they haven't already to save themselves a lot of busy work when the game drops on Steam. Also, when the developers said the game was hard, they weren't kidding. They said they went easier on the difficulty in the base game, knowing it was most likely going to be the first Monster Hunter game for many, but this time they aren't pulling any punches. Black Diablos in particular feels about 5 times more aggressive and flaily with barely any indications on when she's going to emerge from underground or shoot off into a sudden charge. Teostra and Lunastra are an absolute bitch of a time as well, since her moveset hasn't changed much, but she does more sudden damage than what was typical in the base game. Also, I won't be showing the final boss in this video because it's an impressive, memorable, and extremely difficult fight, especially for solo players, but here's what my health bar looked like when I tried to block one of its attacks. In World, once you completed the game, you basically just had to farm footprints in order to proc investigations, which would let you fight monsters and get rare drops as rewards. But in the endgame of Iceborne, they introduce a new system known as the Guiding Lands, a big amalgamation of the 4 biomes from World, interconnected in one medium-sized map, including the Ancient Forest, Wildspire Waste, Coral Highlands, and Rotten Vale, as well as a bunch of mineral and bone deposits that yield rare materials used to make higher rarity armor and weapons. The more you play in the Guiding Lands, the more the area areas and gatherables will level up, allowing for even more rare materials and secret monsters to find, including Zinogre from Monster Hunter Portable 3rd on the PSP. It really changed the way I feel about how World works. Sure, you can still go on individual hunts like optional fights, events, and investigations, as well as expedition mode where monsters will come and go, but the Guiding Lands is made solely for the hardest of the hardcore. When fighting a master rank tempered Elder Dragon, even being equipped with the absolute best armor will still get you absolutely destroyed if your combat skills are lacking even slightly. If you die in the Guiding Lands, you won't fail any missions, but will instead lose an amount of resources the monster yields upon turning in the research. It feels less like an expedition and more like a marathon mode, in which you'll take on one monster and suddenly see another target appear that catches your interest, realize it's going to leave the area soon, and coordinating with your team to branch off from the group and engage it before it has the chance to flee. There's no loading screens, no chance to change your armor decoration or bowgun attachments. It's just you and your friends in the wild, and you gotta get all the rare materials that you can, absolutely decimating monsters to an extent that made me feel less like a brave hunter and more like a vicious bully with opposable thumbs, and before you know it, holy shit, it's 5 AM. It's a shame this is apparently the one and only expansion that Monster Hunter World will get, because even a year after the first game launched, I still found it more engaging than literally any other game I've ever played. The little details are charming, the visuals are buttery smooth, the combat is strenuous, and the social aspects are positive and rewarding. I genuinely hope that, considering they won't be expanding on World any further, Capcom decides to use their approximate $16+ million from the game's earnings and use it to make a dedicated engine other than Havoc that somehow pushes the action to a whole new level in a sequel like, I don't know, Monster Hunter Plateau or something. Because while I'm mostly content with Iceborne, I feel underwhelmed compared to what I was expecting. The main problem I have is the monster variety. Sure, if you look at the total pool of 27 new monsters, it seems really generous for a massive expansion, at least until you realize that they recycled most of the look and AI for monsters like Shrieking Legiana, Fulgur Anjanath, Ebony Odogaron, Viper Tobi-Kadachi, Coral Puke Puke, Nightshade Paolumu, and 2 secret monsters that are plenty cool and everything but have been done before and use the same base monsters from the game as the skeleton model. If you're counting monsters that were either brand new or made from the ground up for the Havoc engine, you're looking at 12 new monsters, with some of these like Rakadios, Yangaruga, and Zinogre being monsters from earlier games. If we're only counting entirely new monsters, we're looking at a grand total of 7. Overall, Iceborne is a perfectly competent game that greatly expands the experience of the base game, but I think I was expecting much more than what we got. The new battle mechanics are solid, the house decoration is refreshing, the new biome is beautiful and makes a great backdrop for any intense fight, and Seliana and the new Gathering Hub are an absolute improvement over the originals. Now we just have to wait for Capcom to stop shilling out to Sony and Microsoft and just release it on PC at the same time, because I'm personally done with the long loading times, especially when trying to zone into the new ice biome. Let's see how long it takes to load into Hoarfrost Reach. Now let's look at how long it takes to load the biggest map on PC. You can hardly tell the difference.